Some years back in one of the recent presidential elections, I remember watching interviews of the two candidates who were running for office, and the interviewer asked each one the same question. He asked of them, "What do you think is your greatest attribute?" And one of them, I don't remember exactly what he said. It was something perfectly fine. And then the other one, when he asked him, "What do you think is your greatest attribute?" he said, "My humility." Did you catch it? Humble people don't go around telling everybody how humble they are. So just by telling everybody my greatest attribute is my humility is a bragging moment. So he was proving by his own words that he was not a humble person. Humility, which is what Jesus is talking to the apostles about today, is the foundation of being of good service to other people. Braggarts and people who are doing things all for themselves end up serving just themselves and nobody else. And we see that with Jesus and the apostles here today. Now look at the thing. First of all, Jesus has just told them he's about to go up to Jerusalem where he's going to suffer and die and rise from the dead. They don't understand what it means. They're afraid to question him about it. And so instead of asking him, "Lord, what do you mean by that?" they start a conversation about themselves. And it's absolutely silly. I can almost imagine the scene. Obviously, as they're going to Capernaum, Jesus is walking a little distant from them, so he can't hear what they're saying. But he knows. He knows very well what they've been arguing about. And when they get there, he says, "Gee, guys, what were you arguing about along the way?" And of course, they fall silent because they had been arguing about which of them was the most important. I can almost see the picture. Them saying, "Well, I'm more important than you are." "Oh, yeah? Well, why?" Well, Andrew could say, "Well, I was the very first one to follow Jesus, so I'm more important than you." And James could say, "Yeah, but the Lord always calls me to be one of the three who goes with him and not you, so I'm more important than you are." And John could say, "Yeah, but I'm the baby of the group. I'm only a teenager, so Jesus obviously loves me more than you, and I'm going to be around a lot longer." And Peter could say, "Well, no, I'm the rock. He made me the head of the church, and he gave me the keys to speak in his name, so I'm more important than you." Absolutely silly. Silly to think of the first bishops of our church, the foundation of how Jesus' salvation is going to go to the ends of the earth, arguing as to which of them is the most important. And notice their discussion leads to arguing, not to agreement. Anytime we're not humble, how often that leads to arguments. So many of the problems we deal with, the arguments, the conflicts, when we have difficult people in our lives who, we have to walk on eggshells around them, does not a lot of it come from somebody who is not humble, who kind of expects us to, bow down before them and put them on a pedestal or something like that? How much grief in our lives is caused by the lack of humility in so many different people? Humility is a foundation of serving Christ. We cannot be servants of others if we are expecting other people to serve ourselves. Rather, we have to lay our lives down completely, just as Jesus did, to be of service to other people. And that's not always easy. The word humility actually comes from the Latin word humus, which means dirt, or the land, if you will. But physically, the dirt that you see there. And I've always seen it as a reminder that all of us have to be down to earth. We have to put ourselves on the same level and say, I am not better than anybody else. Maybe I have a special ministry, a calling, whatever it may be, but that doesn't mean I'm greater than somebody else, because all of us are in the same boat. We're all people in need of salvation. And every one of us has committed sins, some more than others, but when we stand before the Lord, we are all, it's like the difference between a dime and a penny before the multi-million dollars of God. What difference does it make? The great holiness of one person over the great sinfulness of other, before the majesty of the Lord, it amounts to nothing. And so reminding ourselves that even if we're not bad people, certainly, I'm sure none of us would have to honestly say I'm an evil person or anything like that, but we're all in need of the Lord's salvation. And in understanding that, we realize the Lord has called us to help each other get to heaven, to be of service to one another. And that means being humble in order to do that. And doing things not for the reward we get out of it, but simply because it's the right thing to do, or because we want to bring Christ to people. Today we honor our catechists, since our religious education program is beginning this week. And catechists are people who usually have to be very humble to serve, to deal with the children, and of course some of the older ones who, maybe the little ones, don't mind being there, but the older ones who've been in school all day and everything, and when they have to come for classes, they don't want to have to sit through class again, which is one reason I'm teaching the 8th grade this year, and the set class I have is going to be very different from all of that. I have another approach to it, so you'll like it, Noah. But nevertheless, sometimes, no matter how much you try to be exciting and interesting, there's some kids who just don't want to be there. And they're moaning through the whole thing, and you just have to be humble and put up with it and say, Lord, I hope I'm planting some seeds in this child. And of course, they're all volunteers, so they can't say they're doing it for the paycheck they get. No, they're doing it out of their love for the Lord and their desire to share the faith with others. And yet, even sometimes a good thing like that, we can be a little bit lacking in humility. I remember years ago, a catechist in one parish where I was assigned who had counted. She taught 2nd grade for many years, and she counted, and she could tell you, I have prepared 1,327 children for their first Holy Communion. And it was becoming almost a bragging moment that she was telling me, look how many kids I have prepared. You see, it was all about her at that point. Not saying that she wasn't doing anything good for the children, but that was clearly a weakness there. Do we do good deeds for other people, expecting something in return out of it, or do we do it humbly simply because it's the right thing to do? There are little things we can look at in our lives just to help us with that. Imagine, for example, a friend of yours asks you for help one day. Maybe they're preparing to move, and they say, I just need somebody to help me pack up. And so you spend your whole day helping them pack up their boxes, whatever it is, and maybe they're only moving across town. They're not moving far away or anything. But still, you give them the whole day. And then the day comes that you need a favor, and you call them and say, I could really use your help tomorrow. Do you think you could help me with this? And they say, oh, gee, I really would like to help you, but, it's just not convenient for me. Tomorrow I'm really busy. I just can't come and help you. Do we say to ourselves, well, okay, I understand that, or, I was there when they needed me, and they're not there for me. Boy, you're going to see how busy I'm going to be the next time they need help. So, in effect, what we're doing then is we're doing good deeds for other people in order to get something in return back from them. And we weren't doing it maybe because our hearts were in the right place and saying, I'm helping someone else, and hopefully somebody else will help me when I need it. Another very practical thing that I always love to chuckle about, Christmas cards. Now, I know not everybody sends out Christmas cards, but I send out cards every year, and my list keeps growing. I've got about 200 people I send cards to every year. I don't get 200 cards back. I don't get cards back from a lot of people I send cards to, but I don't care. I'm basically just sending a Christmas card to these people because I want to wish them a Merry Christmas. For many people, it's the only contact we have throughout the course of the year, friends from college, for example, or people who have moved to the other side of the country. So this is the one way to keep in touch with them. But some people, you notice how they have all these little charts or things, a book you can have of your Christmas card list, and they have the year and sent and received, and you can check it off. Did I send one? Did I receive one from them? And you're sort of making sure that if I sent one, I got one back from that person. And then one year comes and you look at the list and you say, this person hasn't sent me a card in 6 years. I'm tired of wasting a card and a stamp on them. If they're not sending me a card, I'm not sending them one. So you decide that year not to send them a card. And a couple of days before Christmas, the mail comes, and guess what? There's a card from them in the mail. And you look at it and say, oh, why did they send me a card? Now I got to send them one, and they're going to think I only sent one because they sent one to me, which is true, but you don't want them to know that. And you have to step back and say, how silly. What are we doing? Are we trying to somehow stock up on Christmas cards or try to see how many we get? Or is our esteem built on how many people remember to send us a Christmas card? I think we all know people in our lives, if you don't send them a birthday card, what's going to happen? Oh, World War III will erupt. If they don't get a card from you, oh my goodness. If you know people like that, how difficult it can be. And we know being around people who puff themselves up, who expect everybody to bow before them, you walk on eggshells around them. And they're not easy people to be with, and they don't make our lives easier, do they? And yet sometimes, perhaps, we can be as guilty of the same thing that we sometimes might accuse others of doing. Today, maybe the Lord is calling us to ask ourselves, when I do a good deed, when I do something right, am I doing it to try to get something in return out of them? So I'm paying into something that this way I have a lot of people who owe me favors. Are we doing it to evoke a favor out of them? Or are we doing the right thing simply because it's the right thing? Probably the easiest way to do it is, or to look at it is say, if I do something and the other person never even says thank you, would I still do it anyway the next time? Are we doing it for our greater honor and glory, or for God's greater honor and glory? My brothers and sisters, if we want to make a difference in the world, puffing ourselves up and making people serve us only leads to arguing. It leads to bitter feelings. That person didn't think about me, they didn't care about me, blah, 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 and all that stuff that happens that causes us so much interior bitterness, and if we mention it to somebody else, probably is going to cause a conflict or maybe even an argument. Whereas humble service to one another, doing things simply because it's the right thing to do, will bring about so much concord, so much peace in our lives, and will make us more pleasant people to be around, people that other people will respect. They'll look at us and say, I like that person. That person makes me feel good about myself, and maybe even can say, leads me to Jesus, because Jesus, there for me what Jesus would be for me if he were here. And so let that be our prayer today, because anybody who goes around telling himself how humble he is, well, the first thing you know about the person is he's not humble, kind of like holiness. A holy person doesn't go around telling you how holy he is. So whenever you hear somebody saying that, they're kind of almost betraying the fact that they don't have humility and they don't have holiness. Perhaps it's easier for us to recognize when we are not being humble and when we are not holy than, in fact, when we are. Because holiness and humility are very strange things. The moment we think we find them, we've lost them. May Jesus Christ be praised, now and forever.